found two persons holding a measurement tape in their hand and measuring a land. There you won't stop. That is a civil matter. There you won't stop. You will see, yes, two persons are measuring the land. Let's go away. This is how we normally look at the civil aspects, the civil matters. And here comes the problem when you think of initiating a practice on civil side, and then after entering into the arena of practice of civil side, getting some bottlenecks in between, you suddenly leave it and go to some other kind of a practice, maybe consumer court, maybe some other. No issue, it's your choice after all. People sometimes think of practicing on criminal side would be helping them earn money easy. I don't agree with that. Any kind of a practice requires devotion, requires hard work. May it be a civil, may it be a criminal. But as we understand, in criminal matters, it is quite easy to initiate the era of earning money at the very initial stage of our advocacy. That may not be a matter in case of a civil case. This is a biggest bottleneck why people sometimes don't tend to look into the civil cases. And because of this bottleneck, the further proceedings, the further aspects, the further life in civil practice, they find it a bit difficult. Again, it is also said that when you are practicing on civil side, there is a huge waiting period. What do you mean by that waiting period? Many of you may have heard that there is a waiting period in the advocacy. Waiting period, normally people talk about the waiting period with reference to the earning capacity. Of course, anybody who is just entering into a profession may not be in a position to earn in lakhs. He has to wait. Maybe for that waiting period, people tend to go to some other kind of a practice. But my opinion in that regard, of course, before I start my topic, let me tell you how civil cases can be made more interesting, how you can try and understand civil proceedings in an easy manner. And then I will take you through the tunnel of suits pertaining to minors. At the very junior stage, normally people say that you have to carry diary of your senior. But when you carry diary, that means that you are following a matter. That means that you know what matters are being listed of your senior in a particular court. Not only that, make use of this period. Try to open the cases, try to read the pleadings, try and understand the proceedings. This is the only period which you can devote for understanding so many things. This will be a great learning experience for you all. I am aware you have recently passed the law degree and probably you have entered or you might be entering into legal profession soon. So you are in the intervening period of passing of law and entering into the legal profession. The National Judicial Academy, which is placed in the Bhopal, Madhya Pradesh, has taken up the task for asking the judicial academies in the state level to take up such programs for the recently passed law graduates before their registration as an advocate. The purpose is that you should get a ready-made material at the initial stage which will boost your confidence to make you understand that you have completed a degree of law and you have to have a life with that as a practitioner. So my task would be to make the topic a bit easy so that you can understand it in a simplest way. When we talk of a suit by or against minor, let me remind you all that when you were in the law college, you may have studied a topic under the professional ethics that you owe certain duties not only towards the court but to the litigant. Now I'm emphasizing on your duties on the litigant. Why I'm emphasizing on this? Because we will be dealing with the topic pertaining to minor. In that case, minor will be your litigant. And when minor will be your litigant, therefore you have to have always keep in mind your duties towards the client. Now, for that purpose, I may again remind you a bit as to a material aspect that advocate is considered to be the officer of the court. Now, when we call or when we say that advocate is an officer of the court, it is not only his duty to help the court in coming to a correct conclusion on the facts and law, but to supply correct material on law and facts to the court so that the court can come to a correct conclusion. Moreover, you have to simultaneously take all possible care to give justice to the case of your client. For the purpose of today's session, your client will be a minor. So what care has to be taken? Before I enter into Order 32 of the Code of Civil Procedure, which specifically deals with the cases relating to minor, let me take you through some basics. Excuse me. In criminal law, the criminal law can be set in motion by anybody. You must be aware of that. Means anybody, though he is not connected to the case, can go to the police station, file an FIR or file a criminal complaint before the court. That is not the case here in civil cases. In civil cases, only the person whose right has been violated can come to the court. Of course, there is one exception, that is a representative suit, but we are not talking about that. So one who is filing a suit as a plaintiff in the capacity of a plaintiff must have a locus standi. This is the basic rule. Now, when you will be acting as a lawyer, full-time lawyer, and suppose some person comes to you and says that XYZ property belongs to a minor and there is a threat to that property, and I want you to work as a lawyer for that minor and file a suit, whatever kind of a suit may be necessary for that matter. Now, at this stage itself, the aspect has to be looked into very seriously. Why? First is that the party you will be representing in the court is a minor. And when a party you are representing is a minor, he may not know so many things, maybe so many things on facts, so many things on law, he may not know. So in that case, how would you elicit the information for the purpose of filing of a suit? You have to depend on some elderly member from the family of that particular minor. So there comes the first important aspect. How would you record the facts? How would you elicit the information? And mind it well, when a party is minor for whom you will be filing a suit, it is your responsibility to take utmost care and to adhere to the principle that welfare of minor is very important. So that should start from, suppose if the matter is such that wherein you have to send a notice. First, there are so many kind of matters, maybe a rent act case or similar kind of a cases, wherein you may be first required to send a notice to the proposed defendant before you file a suit. Now there, from itself, you have to take the matter seriously, because whatever you mention in the notice, it's not a casual affair. You have to first study what is the law. You have to first study what are the facts. You have to first try and understand how the facts are intermingled or connected to the law related thereto, and then accordingly draft a legal notice. That notice will play a vital role as an evidence during the course of the trial. Therefore, drafting it casually is not expected. And what I have experienced in many cases is that not all, few I am saying, I'm not blaming anybody, but few lawyers take the drafting of notice very casually, and that sometimes affect the case of the client. So for the purpose of drafting, you must be aware of the rules, the law, and the facts. Then only you will be able to draft a proper notice. So your task would start right away from the time when the family member of a minor comes to you seeking for filing of a suit. Then comes pleading. Now, pleading is very important. Suppose you are a defense lawyer in a criminal case. I will be just jumping from civil to criminal so that you will understand it easily. Suppose you are a defense lawyer in a criminal case. What defense you can take during the cross-examination? Any defense, hundreds of defenses. There is no limit. But that is not the case when it comes to civil case. When it comes to civil case, your pleadings will bind you. Therefore, while making the pleadings, you must understand the importance of pleadings. What is to be pleaded, what is not to be pleaded. For that, pleading is a very essential concept of any legal jurisprudence. It is the way in which the parties to the dispute tell their case to the court and to the adverse party. So through pleading, you will be telling your case to the court as well as to the adverse party. Now, as per Order 6, Rule 1 of the Code of Civil Procedure, pleading shall mean a plaint and a written statement. So if you open a book of Civil Procedure Code and if you open the Chapter 6, Order 6 thereof, Rule 1 itself will make it clear that pleading includes only plaint and the written statement. We were very fortunate that at our times there was a law relating to pleading as a subject of our curriculum in the law college. I don't know what is the position right away, but a famous jurist on that was Mogha. What he says, pleadings are statements in writing drawn up and filed by each party to a case stating what is the contentions or what contentions will be at trial. Thereby they give all the details therein which the opponent is required to know. So when you put up a case in the plaint, your purpose is to make the court understand what is your case and make the other side understand what is the case he will be meeting in the trial. If you put up a clear case, the defendant's written statement will be clear. If you don't put up a clear case, the defendant may not give a clear written statement, and that probably may give him another chance to add to the pleading by way of amendment in the pleading. So to avoid that, you have to have mastery on the facts for the purpose of pleading. Now, I may refer a case of Devaki Nandan versus Muralidhar. It has been reported in AR 1957 Supreme Court 133. Why I am referring this case? This case highlights the importance of the pleading in civil case. What it says, and I will be reading it, only 2-3 lines are there. Finding of a court is null and void if it is based on material not mentioned in the pleading. Therefore, pleading is the backbone of the suit on which the fate of the suit rests. What it says, in short, that whatever you plead, only to that you can stick to during the course of evidence. Even the court cannot go beyond the pleading. So if some findings are given by the court which are not even pleaded at all, then that finding would go null and void. This is what this judgment says. Now you will wonder as to why I am giving so much importance to pleading in the introduction to the topic itself, my endeavor is just to let you know all about pleading, because when it comes to the case of a legally disabled person like a minor or a person of unsound mind, it's for lawyers to take all possible care of the plaintiff to draft the written statement legally and completely. So whatever may be the nature of the suit, may it be a suit filed by the government, may it be a suit against the government, may it be a suit by an indigent person, may it be a suit filed by a minor or against a minor, always and always pleading plays a vital role. So my advice to all of you would be, master the art of pleading. Master the art of understanding the facts of the case. Connect those facts of the case to the law in a correct way so that you will give justice to your client. When I'm saying justice to client, I'm not saying about the judgment to be given by the court. It will be the justice to the case, whatever you heard from your client, giving justice to that. 2-3 more minutes on pleadings and I will shift to the topic. The objective of pleading has been expressed in the case of Thorpe versus Holdsworth. It's a very old case, but it still holds ground. The objective is to taper down the parties to certain specific issues and forbid enlargement of issues. So if there are rules of pleading, then unnecessary pleadings will not be there. The parties or the lawyer will stick to material aspects only. That will taper down, that will reduce down unnecessary details. And because you are reducing down the unnecessary details, the other side cannot go on elaborating things and will automatically get tapered down, and there will be no enlargement of issues unnecessarily. Therefore, there is a need of pleading. If there is no pleading in civil cases, then God knows, sky will be the limit. A matter may not end ever. So pleading is must, and it is quite important in any civil matter. The other object or importance of pleading is to avoid sudden and astonishing facts from emerging in the proceeding. If there is no law of pleading, then what will happen? In the course of the trial, as the matter goes further, you will go on changing your stand. That is not allowed. You have to stick to what is your pleading. This is also importance of pleading. This will protect your valuable time of advocates, time of the court, time of the litigants, and entire judicial system throughout. This eliminates irrelevant facts and aid the court to reach a fruitful conclusion. This is how the pleading is very important. Why I am giving so much importance, I will again explain a bit later. There are 4 basic rules of pleading. You must be aware of that, but I am just reiterating for the purpose of an introductory backdrop to my topic. The pleading has to state only facts, and that too material facts and not law. So suppose if it is a suit for removal of encroachment, if it is agricultural land and your neighboring person has encroached in the property, and if you have to file a suit, then what minimum facts you will mention? That you are owner of this property, defendant is the adjacent owner, and the area of your property is this much, and when the measurement was done, defendant was found to have encroached to so and so extent. So remove the encroachment. These are the bare minimum facts which are expected to be mentioned in the pleading. Is it expected to plead law? No. So law is not expected to be pleaded. Case laws are not expected to be pleaded. Only facts, that too material facts. Even the evidence is not expected to be pleaded. Say for example, if I am filing a suit for declaration of my ownership based on sale deed, what I will mention in the sale deed, by virtue of this sale deed registered on so and so date, I became owner thereof. This is sufficient pleading for ownership. It is not expected to mention therein that the sale deed was executed on so and so date in the presence of XY and AB. They put signature AB put signature, XY put signature, I also put signature, it was written in that. All these are evidential facts. These are not required to be mentioned in the pleading. In the pleading, it is sufficient if you mention that I became owner by virtue of the sale deed dated so and so, which is a registered document executed by XYZ. That's all. Pleading, you should try to make concise, precise, brief. It should not be verbose. It should not be running into pages after pages, 50 pages, 60 pages. Not necessary. It's not expected. There are so many other rules of pleadings. If you open the Order 6 of the Code of Civil Procedure, you will find all those rules. Now, before we enter into this topic of suit by or against minor, I again would take an opportunity to give a little details as to filing of the case. Now, let us consider that the party approaching you is a minor. Okay, so party approaching you is a minor means he is approaching you through some adult member. Initially, if the suit requires sending of notice, you will draft a notice, you will send a notice. Then if the other side doesn't take it seriously and wants to contest, the other side will reply to that notice. Then you will realize that there is no other way out except to file a suit. So you will draft a plaint. Now, when you draft a plaint, you have to stick to all these aspects. Then there will be, it is a minor's case. So there will be signature of plaintiff. Now here in this case, being a minor is not expected to put signature on the plaint. Now here who will put a signature? The guardian, the next friend. Now who is that? We will discuss in details. Then there will be verification as to correctness of all the contents thereof. And then it will be supported by affidavit by virtue of 2002 amendment. It has to be supported by the affidavit. Now there are some districts wherein affidavit is made below the plaint itself, and there are some districts wherein the affidavit is made separate and attached to the plaint. Now along with that there will be address memo. Along with that there will be wakalatnama. Then along with that there will be list of documents, whatever documents you will be relying on, and all the documents, original or copies as the case may be, and your wakalatnama. Now all this will be presented to court. Now presented to court means, will it be given to judge? No. This will be presented to us superintendent. So presented to superintendent means there will be a register, a kacha register. You will enter therein the names of the parties and put it there. Then that once you register in the kacha register, then that matter, that file will be taken to the concerned judge. After, of course, applying the provisions of civil manual, after checking all the requisites, if it is worth taking to the judge, then it will be taken to the judge. And if some objection is to be found, if some objection is raised by the office, then you have to remove that objection. Say, for example, it is a matter of minor and you mentioned the plaintiff's name, who is himself is a minor, and you did not mention the name of guardian. Now this is a mistake that has to be corrected. Once that is corrected, then the matter will be registered as a suit, and then further proceedings, then the summons will go, other side will come, he will file written statement, then issues will be framed, matter will go into evidence. So many intervening factors are there. I'm not sticking to those. So this way the proceedings will commence, right? Now coming to our topic. Our topic is suits by or against minor. Now what do you understand by the term minor? Who is the minor? Now when we are talking about a civil litigation with reference to Order 32 of the Code of Civil Procedure, you have to have a look into the provision to understand who is a minor. You cannot go by general perception. Why I am saying so? Because there are so many laws wherein the term minor or child has been defined in a different way. Take for example section 363 of the Indian Penal Code, that is kidnapping from lawful guardianship. There is a difference of age, 16, 18. Take an example of Juvenile Justice Act. Juvenile Justice Act says child below 16 is a child, and 16 to 18 depending on the maturity level for the purpose of heinous crimes. Simultaneously, if you look into the Indian Penal Code general defenses, you will find that child below 7 years is also mentioned there. Child between 7 to 14 is also mentioned there. So, which law? Stick to the basics. Don't search for a case law. Open the book, you will find everything. Nowadays, people go on searching case law on Google instead of opening book. So books are only in the library now, not on the desk. So my request would be, open the book, see. In the Order 32 Rule 1 itself, there is an explanation attached. I will read it for you, what it says. In this order, minor means a person who has not attained his majority within the meaning of section 3 of Indian Majority Act. So the one who has not attained majority as per Indian Majority Act. And as per Indian Majority Act, a person below 18 is a minor. So minor means anybody who is below 18. Don't apply the logic of personal law. Why I am saying, if you apply the logic of personal law, say for example Muslim law, there is a issue of option of puberty, and puberty is said to be attained in case of a lady, in case of a woman, at the age of 14 or 15. Thereafter she becomes eligible for marriage. So the marriageable age issue is there. So don't go here or there. When it says, even though a party is Muslim, when it says that minority means minority as per the Indian Majority Act, you have to stick to this only and nothing else. Now a question shall come in your mind that why there is a special provision for minors. No, I have a counter question for that. I'm not expecting you to answer, I will deal with that. But then all of you are aware that a minor has no right to vote. Why a minor has no right to vote? Now earlier it was 18, now it is 21 so far as voting is concerned. Why? Because it is considered that a minor is normally incapable of understanding what is right and what is wrong. So a minor always requires somebody to take care of his person as well as his property. So that is the logic, and that logic carries forward when it comes to a civil suit. So if you have seen the Indian Contract Act, a contract entered into by a minor is void ab initio. Ab initio means as if it has not been entered into. It's void from inception. Why it is so? The reason is same. The minor is considered to be not capable of knowing so many things. So this is the basic logic why a special provision was required to be made so far as minor and the persons of unsound mind. Who is a person of unsound mind? If you consult the provision of the Code of Civil Procedure Order 32 itself, it says that the person who is suffering from any mental infirmity or who is unable to protect his interest because of that mental infirmity is a person of unsound mind. So these persons are required to be protected, dealt with in a different way, not like ordinary litigants. For that purpose, this is the topic. Now from this much introduction, you may have understood how much Herculean task the advocates are having on their shoulders when it comes to a case to be filed for a minor. Okay, so we'll go further and try and understand what is the process, what is the procedure if a suit is to be filed by a minor or if a suit is filed against a minor. Now what Sub rule 1 of order 32 says is that every suit by a minor shall be instituted in his name by a person in such suit shall be called a next friend. So if a minor has to be made a plaintiff, minor's name will be there as a plaintiff, but he will be represented by a next friend. Now, who is this next friend? What is this concept of next friend? Let me make it clear at the very inception that if you want to generalize the concept of next friend and guardian, both are one and the same. Both are one and the same. But the Code of Civil Procedure has used a special nomenclature that when the plaintiff is minor and he is to be represented by somebody, that somebody has to be called as a next friend and not guardian. And if the defendant is minor and he is to be represented by somebody, then that somebody has to be called as a guardian ad litem. It is just a question of nomenclature. Otherwise, both are guardians. Just a question of nomenclature. So take care when you draft a plaint and you mention the name of the plaintiff who is a minor. You have to mention that represented by next friend XYZ and mention the relationship, mother, father, whoever. That will make a clear and complete title of the suit. Why this is so? Because if you concentrate on rule 2, what this rule 2 says, this is quite important. Where a suit is instituted without next friend, the plaint to be taken off the file. So if you file a suit and unfortunately it skipped from the ministerial staff, assistant superintendent, everybody, and it got registered. And then later on the defendant realizes that in fact the person named as a plaintiff is a minor and he has not been represented through next friend. What the defendant would do then? The defendant will file an application requesting the court to take the plaint off the file, and the plaint will be taken off the file. Is it not a serious issue? Yes. It's not only serious issue for the purpose of the rights of the parties, but your reputation also. You don't know the law. This is what people will try and find. So try to make yourself perfect on law. I won't say perfect, at least you must know what is what and where we can find it at this stage. Once you know that, then you will by practice improve on all sides. Whenever such a situation comes that the advocate did not mention the name of the next friend or did not make the representation of the next friend for the minor in the plaint and the plaint is taken off, cost will be imposed by the court. This is what the rule 2 says. So it is something which has to be very carefully looked into at the time of filing of the suit itself, presentation of the plaint itself. Now, who is the next friend? For filing of a suit by minor, next friend is essential. This is what we considered. However, if a suit is to be filed against minor, then appointment of a guardian for that minor defendant is necessary. That also we discussed. The one who is representing the plaintiff, minor plaintiff, is called next friend. That we discussed. And the one who is representing the minor defendant is called guardian ad litem. That also we have now discussed. Now, let us try and understand one important difference between next friend and guardian ad litem. A question for that purpose I will formulate, and the question will be like this: whose duty it is to appoint a next friend? And the other question is, whose duty it is to appoint a guardian ad litem? These are the two questions. Now, next friend is also guardian, guardian ad litem is also guardian, but there is a difference as to duty to appoint. As I initially said, If the plaintiff is minor, it is the lawyer's duty to give a proper representation to the minor plaintiff through a next friend. So it is for the plaintiff to come up with the case of addition of a next friend as a guardian for the plaintiff. So here the court doesn't appoint. The court doesn't appoint the next friend. The party comes up that XYZ is a next friend for the plaintiff. But suppose if a defendant is a minor, then it is for the court to appoint a minor. How? I will make it simple. You filed a suit for some major person. You are a lawyer, you are an advocate, and you are filing a suit for some major person, a male or a female, fully grown, major adult. So there is no need of next friend and all that. But the defendants are, defendant number 1 is major, defendant number 2 is major, and suppose defendant number 3 is minor. Okay. Now, when the defendant number 3 is minor, you have to take care of mentioning somebody's name as a guardian ad litem in the plaint itself. You will mention, you will not appoint, you will mention. And when you present a plaint or file a suit in the court of law, along with that suit, you will file one application requesting the court to appoint that fellow whose name you have mentioned in the array of the parties for the minor defendant as a guardian for that minor. So a plaint and along with an application. So what the court will do then? The court will, when the court will issue summons to the defendant, simultaneously court will send a notice to the proposed guardian, asking the proposed guardian whether he is ready to act as a guardian or not. When the proposed guardian comes up before the court and says, yes, I am ready to act as a guardian, then he can be appointed as a guardian ad litem. Here I am talking only about the consent. But then other factors are important. What are those other factors? The one to whom the court is appointing as a guardian ad litem for the defendant must not have any interest adverse to the interest of the minor. Simultaneously, such person must not have any interest in favor of the defendant, in favor of the other party, here in this case plaintiff. So the person you are choosing or the person to whom the court is appointing as a guardian ad litem must be a person who is interested to look into or take care of the interest of the minor and nothing else. So interest of the minor is paramount consideration here. Consent of no person can be appointed as a guardian ad litem unless he consents. If he doesn't consent, there is a different provision. There is a different procedure. How that procedure has to be. Therefore, whenever you file an application for appointment of guardian, in the application, mention so many things, mention in so many words as to how that particular proposed guardian is related to the minor, how you consider that particular guardian to be a person who will be taking or protecting the best interest of the minor and all that. Of course, there are so many other basic things. That the person to be appointed as a guardian should not be unsound mind. It is quite simple, it is very elementary. A minor person cannot be appointed as a guardian of another minor. So he must be major. So the one whom you are appointing, one whom the judge is appointing as a guardian has to be major. Now, if for defendant number 3 who is a minor, a guardian is to be appointed, whether you will pray for appointment of a plaintiff as a guardian to the defendant? No. So the adverse party cannot be appointed as a guardian. Now I may give one more case for your understanding. Apart from this, you must be aware of certain laws. Hindu Minority and Guardianship Act, Guardians and Wards Act. These are the laws which deal with appointment of guardian for the person and property of a minor. Okay. Now suppose for a particular minor, already the competent court has appointed a guardian in another proceeding, and you know that. You as a lawyer of plaintiff, you know that. So whose name you will propose? You will propose the name of that particular guardian who has been appointed by the competent court. Now, let me quickly deal with the question in the chat. One question is, consent of guardian for defendant shall have to be in writing. Whether it shall be in writing? Yes, it shall be in writing. It has to be in writing. The provision says so. I will read a provision a bit later. So this is how guardian who has been appointed by a competent court can also be considered to be a guardian for the purpose of the suit. But it is it obligatory? Say for example, the defendant number 3 in the case is a minor, and some name of some XYZ is mentioned as a guardian for that defendant number 3, who happens to be a guardian already appointed by a competent court. So whether I, being a judge, shall continue him to be a guardian? No, not necessarily. I can continue, but not necessarily. Why? Because the court has to make an inquiry whether he will uphold the interest of the minor or not. Or maybe for some reasons, sometimes it happens that a person who is appointed as a guardian is too busy, may not come to the court. So for the purpose of litigation, somebody else can be appointed as a guardian also. So all these things you will find, whatever I discussed just right away, you will find in Order 32, Rule 3 of the Code of Civil Procedure. Now, two more things in that respect. Whenever you apply for appointment of a guardian, that application must give details as to how that particular fellow would be a proper guardian in your view. Simultaneously, it should be supported by affidavit. That affidavit must incorporate all these things: how he is not related to the other side, how he is best person or a fit person to take care of the minor's property or minor's person during the proceeding of the case. No guardian can be appointed without giving notice to him and without obtaining consent, as we discussed right away. Once you appoint a guardian for the defendant, guardian ad litem, he will continue to be a guardian throughout the proceeding. Maybe if the suit is disposed of and the appeal is there, then for appeal he will continue. He will continue unless removed, discharged, or disqualified. Now, when to be removed, when to be disqualified, when to be discharged, we will discuss in the course of the discussion. But one fact I would like to emphasize upon repeatedly is it is the duty of a lawyer to know that only such person shall be appointed for the minor's interest as a guardian or next friend who will best serve the interest of the minor. So it's not like anybody can be appointed as a guardian. I will give you one example for that. Suppose whenever a matter to be filed before the court comes before you, you are sitting in the chamber, one minor boy with mother comes to you and they narrated facts. Thereby you found that a suit for declaration has to be filed for that minor. Then suddenly you will say, okay, mother, you have come with mother, so mother will be guardian. No. Apply the same thinking which the judge would apply at the time of appointment of guardian. See whether that mother is a fit person to depose, whether she knows all the facts, whether she is a fit person to take utmost care of the minor, or whether she has other responsibilities also. Maybe father is there who may be a proper person. So it is initially for you, when you are mentioning the next friend, for the plaintiff to choose who can he or she be. So in that sense, choose the right person initially and apply for a right person when it comes to appointment of a guardian ad litem for the defendant. Now, if you mention the name of somebody to be made a guardian of the defendant, it's not that court will simply rely on you and continue that person as a guardian. It is for the court to make an independent inquiry to see whether that particular person whom you are proposing to be a guardian for that matter is a fit person to act as a guardian or not. These are very important considerations so far as this aspect is concerned. Whenever a guardian is appointed, or say for example, whenever a suit is filed for a minor by a next friend, so how the court will be satisfied that the next friend will obey all the orders of the court? Because he is representing minor, he is not filing a suit in his own capacity. He is as a representative of the minor. So court may ask the next friend sometimes to furnish security. Why? Because in that case, defendant may be required to take up so many issues, make so many expenditures on interim applications and all that. So ultimately, if the decree is to be drawn up, who will take care of that cost? So for that, to secure the cost which may be imposed at the time of judgment, the court may ask giving of security. It is not obligatory, it is not always, but for safer side, maybe sometimes it may be asked. Now, there is one provision one question was there in the chat box that whether the consent of the guardian for defendant shall have to be in writing. For that, I will bring the attention of the concern to Order 32, Rule 4, Sub Rule 3. And that Sub Rule 3 says, no person shall, without his consent in writing, be appointed as a guardian for the suit. So here the word in writing has been inserted in the year 1976. Prior to that, this was not there, but now so many years have elapsed, and 40 years maybe. So consent in writing is must. Now getting further, one important aspect for all of you as a lawyer. There is a specific provision, and therefore I would read that provision, rather just leave it for you to read. This is Rule 5 of the Code of Civil Procedure. Order 32, Rule 5 of the Code of Civil Procedure. For you, I am just reading it. This is the representation of minor by next friend or guardian for the suit. Now, what it says, every application to the court on behalf of minor, other than an application under Rule 10, shall be made by next friend or guardian. So, whenever a suit is in relation to a minor, whatever application is to be made to the court, it is to be made by or through that guardian or next friend, not by minor directly. The guardian, once appointed throughout. This is one. Second, now this is very important. Every order made in the suit or any application before the court in or by which a minor is in any way concerned or affected, without such minor being represented by next friend or guardian of the suit, as the case may be discharged, and where the pleader of the party at whose instance such order was obtained knew or might reasonably have known the fact of such minority with cost to be paid by the pleader. Means you are a pleader, you know that the defendant is a minor, still you file an application hiding that you know that the defendant is a minor, and thereby some order is passed against that defendant. And if the court later on realizes that you, despite knowing, have filed this application, then you in person as a lawyer may be held responsible to pay cost. So civil litigation is all about fairness. You have to be fair enough. If you know that a particular party is a minor, disclose it to the court, let that minor be represented by the next friend, so that or the guardian, so that the matter can be fairly taken forward. It's not something which you can hide and seek or play a game of hide and seek and win. It's not like that. So this is something which I wanted to bring it to your notice. Now one question may come in your mind, that Suppose if a guardian is appointed for the purpose of a suit, and it is a suit relating to some immovable property, can a guardian compromise the suit? Or whether if the suit is ultimately decreed, can the guardian take possession of the property? Means if the suit is decided in favor of minor, whether the guardian can take possession of the property, which is the subject matter as per the decree. This is one question. And second question is, can the guardian enter into a compromise with the other side? These are million-dollar questions. Why I am saying million-dollar questions? Because Order 32, Rule 6. Because of this Order 32, Rule 6, what it provides? A next friend or guardian cannot receive the property under decree without the leave of the court. So next friend or guardian cannot receive the property under decree. For that also, court's permission is necessary. In which case, in case if there is a compromise, or in case if there is a decree passed in favor of the minor. If it's not that, court will not grant, court will not allow. It's not a gospel truth like situation or a final word like situation. If the guardian applies and if the court finds that the property can be given in possession of the guardian, then it can be. And especially when it is done, or this rule may not apply, especially when the guardian is karta of a joint family or a guardian is father or mother of the minor, then their interest may not be contrary to the interest of the minor generally. So this is a rider. Why this is a rider? This is again for the protection, because the minor on his own volition, on his own willingness is not coming to the court. Somebody who is taking care of the minor thinks that it will be for the benefit of minor and he is filing the suit. So who is taking decisions for minor? Somebody else. Therefore, whose responsibility is to take care for the minor? First, lawyer, second, judge. So this Rule 6 again underlines the same principle that when it comes to minor, you have to take all possible care. Now coming to compromise. If the suit is to be compromised, you are aware that, probably you may be aware that as per section 89 of the Code of Civil Procedure, the matter before the first hearing has to be taken up for alternative dispute resolution, maybe for Lok Adalat, maybe mediation and all that. So the first endeavor shall be to get the problem resolved by amicable settlement, right? Now, if the parties are minor, then of course, with the permission of the court, the compromise can be, the matter can be sent for settlement to the mediation center or to the Lok Adalat, right? For sending, there is no issue. For entering into compromise, there is some issue. Now, ultimately, suppose plaintiff is a minor, defendant is major, and plaintiff's next friend and defendant sat together and decide the terms of compromise, and they agreed for that. Now, the next friend is agreeing for not himself, for the minor. A minor means the one whose mouth is shut because he is not supposed to speak anything. His interest will be taken care of by the next friend. In that case, it is for the court to first see the terms of compromise and try and understand whether the terms of compromise are for the benefit of the minor or not, taking the interest of the minor or not, or detrimental to the interest of the minor. If the court finds that the terms proposed to be entered into by way of compromise are detrimental to the interest of the minor, then that compromise may not be allowed. However, if the terms of compromise are taking utmost care of the interest of the minor in the property or the litigation, then the court may allow. Thus, whenever a compromise is to be entered into in such a suit, it is for the lawyer of the next friend for whom, of the minor for whom next friend is appointed, to make an application seeking permission of the court to enter into a compromise. If the compromise is for the benefit of the minor, then permission may be granted. Now, the second aspect in this regard is that the application for such permission has to be supported by affidavit. Why affidavit? What is to be mentioned in the application? In the application, the lawyer will mention that these are the proposed terms, and if these terms are materialized, or if the agreement is arrived at in compromise on the basis of these terms, these will be beneficial to the interest of the minor in these many ways. So he has to explain how this will be beneficial to the interest of the minor. Otherwise, how court will understand? And this has to be disclosed on affidavit. So the application has to be supported by affidavit. In the affidavit also, you have to mention all these things. You means you for the next friend. If application is filed by the plaintiff, next friend. If it is filed by the defendant minor, then by the guardian, right? That I have explained in the initial stage itself. So once the application comes, affidavit comes, court is satisfied. Will it be over? No. Now the important aspect comes. The lawyer, now listen carefully, the lawyer who is representing the minor regarding whom the next friend has applied for permission to compromise the suit, the lawyer has to file a certificate in the court. Now this is the lawyer has to file a certificate before the court, mentioning in the certificate that the compromise which is proposed to be entered into is for the benefit of the minor. So the role of lawyer is also there. Why I initially said that lawyer is the officer of the court. It's not that you will come with a suit and throw it in the court and court will see. No, it's not like that. Since from inception, the role of lawyer is defined. Especially in case where the party is minor, your role is quite important. You have to uphold the interest of the minor in all possible way. So this is how the compromise can be arrived at. Now, if you consider order 23 for that matter, same provision has been reiterated in order 23 of the Code of Civil Procedure regarding compromise. So this was regarding compromise, and so by this time we have dealt with the issue of appointment of a next friend, representation of minor plaintiff by next friend, representation of minor defendant by guardian ad litem, and the rules pertaining to taking up the proceeding, appointment of the guardian ad litem, and the responsibility of lawyer in case if there is a possible compromise to be entered into in the suit. So if anybody is having any question on this much aspect, you can type in the chat box. As and when I see, I will answer that. And with that understanding, we will proceed further. Now, one question. Can a next friend retire from the case? This is again a $1 million question. What does that mean? If a minor is a plaintiff represented by a next friend, and now next friend don't want the suit to be continued. Now next friend don't want the suit to be continued, or next friend don't want him to be continued as a next friend in the matter. He applies for retirement. Can he do that? Here, Rule 8 of Order 32 is important. That rule specifically says that a next friend shall not retire without first procuring a fit person in his place. So if suppose, for example, A is a minor plaintiff and B is his next friend. Now B wants to retire. First, what rule says? B cannot retire. Second, if at all he wants to retire, he has to procure some other person equally fit to be replaced by to replace him. So it is the responsibility of the next friend to make an alternative arrangement if at all he wants to retire as a next friend, right? And whenever some alternative person comes, of course, the judge will examine whether that particular person will best serve the interest of the minor or not. So this is how the law relating to replacement of next friend deals with. Now, can a next friend be removed? First we considered was retirement of next friend. Can a next friend be removed? Of course. We discussed initially that once the next friend is appointed, he will continue throughout the proceedings and even in the appeal unless removed or unless retired. Before that, he can be retired also. Removed also. So removal for what ground? Removal on what ground? Same inquiry, you have to always keep it in mind that for after doing what inquiry he has been appointed. If he fails in that inquiry, he can be removed. It is as simple as that. 2-3 grounds are there. If his interest becomes adverse, if the next friend's interest becomes adverse to minor, then he will be removed. If he is connected to defendant, means he became hostile in a popular sense and goes and meet the defendant side. Third, if he becomes unable to protect minor's interest. Fourth, he does not perform his duties properly. Then ceases to reside in India. This is important. If the guardian appointed, next friend appointed by next friend of the minor plaintiff ceases to be resident of India, if he goes to some foreign country and starts staying there, then who will represent the minor? How he will represent the minor? Who will come to the court? Who will take care of the matter? So in that case, he can be removed. Or if some sufficient cause is there for replacement, then also a next friend can be removed. Suppose now next friend is removed. Who remains? A minor plaintiff without next friend and a lawyer. A lawyer who was appointed by that next friend. Right? So in that case, another next friend has to be proposed by the lawyer. Normally it happens. One more situation, let me tell you. Suppose you may have come across, or probably you may come across a situation in future while your practice days, during your practice days. Suppose a suit filed by plaintiff, who is the minor, represented by next friend, is pending in the court. The court is calling repeatedly to the next friend to appear for adducing evidence. The lawyer comes and lawyer says, what lawyer says, I also have written a letter to the next friend and asked him to come to the court. I also informed him that if you don't come, court is going to dismiss the suit. And still he is not coming. So in that case, some lawyers would say, sir, then dismiss the suit. Whether dismissal will best serve the interest of the minor? No. Rather, dismissal will take away the rights of the minor. So the lawyer in that case shall strive hard to seek appointment of a next friend in place of the original next friend. Normally don't allow a suit to be dismissed for non-representation. What is the effect of non-representation? Initially we considered that the plaintiff will be taken off the file, but then that is a curable defect that can be cured later on also on application. Somebody comes, matter goes. Now coming to the Rule 10 and Rule 11. If a next friend is removed or a next friend is retired, then in his place some other person has to come. This is what we discussed. Until some other person takes his place, the matter will be stayed. The matter will be stayed. There will be automatic stay. And whose responsibility it is? I will read Rule 10. On the retirement, removal, or death of the next friend, death is also considered, of the minor, Further proceedings shall be stayed until the appointment of next friend in his place. So until next friend is appointed, further course will be stayed. The law doesn't say dismiss the suit. The law on the contrary says that the matter will be stayed until appointment. Now what sub rule 2 says? Where the pleader of such minor omits within a reasonable time to take steps to get a new next friend appointed, any person interested in the minor or in the matter in issue may apply to the court for appointment of one. Now, two remedies. This provision speaks of two remedies. One, suppose the next friend died or is removed or is retired. Sub-rule says matter will be stayed. But how long? Until the next friend is replaced. Whose duty it is? It is the duty of the pleader. It is the duty of the lawyer. The lawyer has to replace the next friend. One. If the lawyer omits, doesn't take care, don't do that. But the law is there which says if the lawyer doesn't take step, then anybody can come who is interested to become next friend of the minor and apply to the court. This is a unique position. Anybody who is interested in the minor, who is interested to protect the interest of the minor, who is interested to protect the benefit of the minor, who is interested in the welfare of the minor, may come and apply to the court and ask, I may be appointed as a next friend and I will take utmost care in this matter. Court will again make an inquiry on the same line, whether he is a fit person, whether he is having any adverse interest, whether he will take care and all that. And if court finds, court will continue him to be a next friend. So appointment of next friend is not directly by judge, but it is for the lawyer to seek, or somebody else will come and say, I may be appointed. Unlike appointment of a guardian ad litem. Now what will happen if the guardian ad litem dies? Now I understand you may have understood the difference. When I say next friend, it is for the plaintiff, and when I say guardian ad litem, it is for the defendant. So if the defendant is a minor and the guardian ad litem dies, or guardian ad litem is retired or removed for the same reasons, then what to be done? Then again it is for the plaintiff's lawyer to apply for appointment of some other person. If nobody applies for appointment of some guardian, or no steps are taken for appointment of a guardian of the minor defendant, then the court himself suo motu can appoint some officer of the court as a guardian for the defendant. The sum and substance of all this discussion is that a matter wherein a party is a minor, maybe as a plaintiff, maybe as a defendant, such matter cannot be allowed to proceed without these minor persons being represented by a fit guardian. This is very important. So always insist as a lawyer that, always see as a lawyer that minor is properly represented. Why? Minor is considered to be unable to come before the court. Minor is considered to be unable to understand what is the right, what is wrong. Minor is unable to, minor is considered to be unable to know difference between what is right and what is wrong. So in that case, who is the person to take care of him? Either guardian or the lawyer. If nobody, then judge. So ultimately, court is there. Now I will be going to a very important aspect of this case, and that is what would happen if a minor during the course of the proceeding attains majority. If a minor attains majority, how the judge will understand. Say for example, I am a judge sitting here. Am I expected to always consider the every date? Am I expected to on every date consider the array of the parties? Yes, plaintiff is minor. Next date, yes, plaintiff is minor. Next date, yes, plaintiff is minor. How long? No, I'm not so much. I may not be having so much time. So once the minor attains majority, it is the responsibility of the lawyer to inform to the court that in this case, this minor person, means the plaintiff, I'm saying plaintiff, this minor person who is a plaintiff has become major. Then next responsibility is of the next friend to inform to the court that this minor plaintiff has become major. Why? Why this is so? Because on becoming major, there is an option available to the minor. Once the minor becomes major, he may either elect to proceed with the suit and apply for discharge of the next friend or not. So he may consider, no, I don't want to continue with the suit because now I am major. I don't want to continue. He will get his own rights as a party to the suit. He can withdraw the suit, compromise on his own, no need of next friend if he wants to continue. So option is always there. Now what happens? What I have experienced in a few cases is that I will put a mathematical example. If a suit is filed in the year 1990, for making a calculation easy, let us consider year 2000. If a suit is filed in the year 2000 and plaintiff is shown to be of 5 years of age, okay, when he will become major? After 18 years, means in the year 2013 he will become major. Suppose a matter is still pending in the year 2021, and if I see the plaint, still plaintiff is mentioned as a minor, still next friend is coming, still next friend is doing all the affairs of the matter. Is it expected? It is not expected. Whose fault it is? Maybe either lawyer, maybe next friend, maybe they don't know the law. Maybe if the judge has seen, still judge has not pointed out, maybe, possibly. So always consider, always take it into account the provision of law that once the minor becomes major, he has got an option whether to continue on his own or not. If he wants to continue on his own, the next friend will be removed. Next friend will be discharged. Proper word is discharged. And accordingly, the cause title will be amended. How? In the cause title, an application will come to you, and in the application, what the lawyer or the plaintiff will mention, when the suit was filed, plaintiff age was 5 years. Now we are in 2014. So 14 plus 5 is equal to 19. So the plaintiff has now become major and he wants to continue the suit. Kindly allow amendment in the title clause and remove the name of the next friend from the array of the parties. Court will examine the birth certificate or whatever document is available to see. And once the court realizes that yes, the person has become major and he can continue with the suit on his own, the court will allow the application. Accordingly, array of the parties will be amended and the name of the next friend will be removed therefrom. Simultaneously, on becoming major, another option available is that he may say, yes, no, I'm not no more interested in this matter. Let us withdraw this suit or abandon this suit. Let it face its fate, whatever fate it may face. So option is always there. And for that purpose, it is for the lawyer to inform to the minor that see, you were minor when the suit was filed, now you became major, now it is for you to exercise the option whether to continue with the suit or not. He of course will take a legal advice and then decide. It's not that it's in the spur of moment he will say no, I don't want to, or no, I will continue. No, it's not like that. So this is a very important aspect. See, at every stage, role of the lawyer is very much defined whenever it comes to a suit filed by a minor or suit filed against a minor. Now, if there is only one plaintiff, then all right. Only one minor plaintiff, then all right. He can decide whether to continue with the suit or abandon the suit. But if there are more than one plaintiffs, then suppose there are 4 plaintiffs, and out of 4 plaintiffs, one was minor. and that one became major. So can he abandon the entire suit? No. He can apply for striking of his name. His name can be taken off the file. But then important aspect is that if suppose he is a necessary party, then court will not allow his name to be taken off the case. His name can be taken off the array of the parties from plaintiff, and his name will be entered as a defendant because he is a necessary party. Got it? So maybe there are more than one plaintiff, still one minor plaintiff can exercise a choice. Maybe only one plaintiff who is a minor is there, he can exercise his choice. So allow the minor to exercise his choice. Inform the court whenever he become major. Inform the minor whenever such a situation comes so that he can take appropriate legal advice and appropriate decision. Now, one aspect under Rule 15 is that whatever we discussed with reference to a minor throughout this session is applicable if a party is a person of unsound mind. So all these provisions, compromise, if a party is unsound mind and compromise is to be done, then. But you will find that even section 12 or rule 12 means the issue of option is also available. How that option will be exercised? If a person of unsound mind is represented by some next friend and that person of unsound mind is cured, becomes sane, then he can exercise the same right. That is something which requires a thorough inquiry, of course. But then I'm just putting you in this. I'm keeping this session simply informative, not referring to any case law, not referring to anything. I'm just trying to put in the box, put in your mind as to what shall be the simplest kind of a procedure, simplest kind of a process that you can stick to when it comes to a suit by a minor or a suit against a minor. Now, suppose now I'm done with the provisions, but one provision I have left purposefully, and I will be dealing with that provision. Throughout we are speaking that the next friend or the guardian should not have interest in the subject matter. His interest should be only to protect the interest of the minor, right? But suppose it was noticed that the next friend or the guardian was having interest in the minor, was having interest in the subject matter, and still ultimately the matter came to be decided. Means the plaintiff's next friend was having interest in the matter and the suit got dismissed. Means the suit went against the minor. So whether a decree can be set aside on the ground that the next friend was having interest in the subject matter. It can be, but one rider again. If it is shown to the court that though the next friend or guardian was having interest in the subject matter, it never prejudicially affect the interest of the minor, then the decree cannot be set aside. In simple words, if the interest of the guardian has unreasonably affected the interest of the minor, then possibly there can be setting aside of decree. Otherwise, a decree merely on the ground that the next friend or the guardian has got interest in the subject matter cannot be set aside when it is not prejudicially affecting the interest of the minor. So in short, welfare of the minor is a paramount consideration in this case. So far as this order 32 and order 23 of the Code of Civil Procedure is concerned, I have completed this. I will be cursorily touching to one more provision, which is relating to minor. You may have, since you all are law graduates, I suppose that the Code of Civil Procedure is a subject for the last year, third year of 3 years law course and fifth year of the 5 years law course. Why? To understand the procedural law, you need sufficient maturity of mind in 4 years if you are undergoing a 5 years law course, or in 2 years if you are undergoing 3 years law course. You get to understand that what the law is, how to understand the law, how to interpret the law. Then only you will be introduced to the procedure to be adopted while dealing with the cases. For that reason, Evidence Act, CRPC and CPC normally are taught in the last year. But I don't know how much you remember, and for that I have taken you through this provision relating to minor. The only addition I want to make is about the provision in the Limitation Act. Now, suppose when we speak of Limitation Act, we know that a suit has to be filed within a certain period of time as prescribed in the schedule attached to the Limitation Act. And from what date the limitation is to be counted? From the date of cause of action. Normally we call it as a cause of action. So whenever a cause of action is there, from that date the limitation period will start running. Limitation Act provides that once the limitation starts running, no disability, no inability will stop the limitation until it is completely run over. But one provision I just want to point out, that is Section 6 of the Limitation Act, that is legal disability. What this provision says, especially with reference to minor or person of unsound mind, when the cause of action arose, please listen carefully. On the date when the cause of action arose, the person who is entitled to file a suit is minor or a person of unsound mind. Then limitation may not start. Why? Section 6 speaks about legal disability. He is considered to be legally disabled to pursue the matter. Then when he will get the same period of limitation after attaining majority. This is what the provision says. Then why there is a provision of suit to be filed by minor? He can wait until he becomes major, and then within the limitation period he can file a suit, right? Then why there is a provision under CPC that a minor has to file a suit? The reason is to address the urgent needs, urgent reliefs. Suppose minor and his family is having a house and somebody is coming to pull down the house. Whether minor is expected to wait until he becomes major and then file suit? No. That remedy is available as per Limitation Act. But no. Then what he will do? Through next friend, he will go to the court, seek injunction. So if there is urgent relief to be sought for, this chapter can be resorted to. Otherwise, that provision is there. At the time when the right to sue accrues, if a person in whom the right to sue accrues is a minor or is a person of unsound mind, then he can wait until he becomes major, and within the same time of limitation which is originally available, he can file a suit. This is something which I wanted to point out to you. Now, one more aspect, and that aspect day in and day out comes in the court proceedings. Now, just let us keep aside the suit filed by minor or suit filed against minor. Just let us keep it aside. Let us consider that there is a suit filed in the court wherein the plaintiff is major. and there is one defendant and defendant is major. So plaintiff is major, defendant is major. So there is no question of order 32, right? Does it mean that when there is no question of order 32 initially, the question of order 32 will never arise? No. Why? Suppose the suit proceeds for a longer time, and during the pendency of the suit, the plaintiff dies. The plaintiff dies. In that case, what the law says, if the right to sue survives in the legal representatives, then his legal representatives are to be brought on record. Suppose legal representative, if plaintiff is a man and he dies, and he left behind him surviving one wife and two sons. Wife is major, sons are minor. So when you bring the legal representatives on record, they will become plaintiffs. So the wife, being a major plaintiff, doesn't require to be represented by anybody except a lawyer, of course. And the sons who are minor is required to be represented by next friend. And the next friend will be probably the mother. Again, the same process will start. Same situation may arise if a major defendant is there and he dies and his legal representatives are to be brought on record. Few of them are minor. In that case also, appointment of a guardian ad litem may be necessary. And a suit initially, though was not under order 32, may attract order 32. And subsequently, suppose if the parties want to enter into compromise, then order 23 proviso of rule 1 and this order 32 rule 5 would come into picture, and the court has to see whether the compromise is for the benefit of the minor, whether the terms of compromise shows the same, whether the affidavit shows the same, whether the lawyers give certificate that the compromise will be for the benefit of the minor. So this is how the minor's interest has to be taken care of during the entire proceedings. I hope you understood it in the right perspective, and this is what I had for you for today. Though the time allotted to me was till 4 p.m. Since it was a very small issue, I could complete it much earlier than the scheduled time. If you have any query, you can post in the chat box. I will wait for 2-3 minutes so that you can get a time to type it. And after 2-3 minutes, if there are no questions in the chat box, then we will stop. So waiting for 2 minutes only.
सर एक क्वेरी आ रही है.
Yes. Yes, I can see that. Question seems to be whether minor can file own WS after attaining majority. Basically, when the minor is represented by a guardian ad litem, he files the written statement, right? And if later on minor attains majority, he can add. If he wants to add to that written statement, he can add. It's not that he has to completely forego the earlier written statement and file a fresh written statement. He can add. No problem in that. One more question seems to be there. Can court appoint advocate as a guardian ad litem or next friend? Now, so far as next friend is concerned, court's role is very limited. But so far as guardian ad litem is concerned, there is no straitjacket formula as to who shall be appointed. Who shall be appointed means character as such, I'm saying. What are the traits or the qualities that a guardian must possess that the law says? That he should be major, he should not have an interest opposite to the minor and all that. So there is no harm if a advocate is to be appointed as a guardian, but then not the same advocate who is conducting the case for that particular minor person, maybe somebody else, but then that somebody else must be the person who is not having interest adverse to minor. He will take, he is a fit person in a sense that major, sound mind, and taking care of the interest of the minor. If those qualifications are satisfied, then what advocate, what doctor, and what engineer? Anybody? Now one more question is there. If minor dies during proceeding, whether next friend can continue the suit? Now, suit is of minor, right? Next friend is his representative. Why next friend is representing the minor? Because minor is considered to be legally unable to take care of his case, right? Therefore, next friend is just a person holding his hand, carrying him to the particular place. If that minor dies, next friend of his on his own may not have any right surviving in the matter. So matter would end there. Of course, unless the next friend is also a party and he has his own independent right, then he can, as an independent party, continue with the suit. One request seems to be there. Yesterday's case laws compilation, please. So as yesterday sir said, probably to register on the site so that the case laws can be sent on the email. That process we will undertake. No issue on that. I think no more questions are there. Just want to remind you that on salient features of General Clauses Act 1897, a session by Honorable Sri Justice Abhay Ahuja, Judge, Bombay High Court, will start at 11 a.m. tomorrow. Do join it. It is a very important subject, General Clauses Act. You may not have even read it. You may not have you may not be knowing, since it is not taught in the law college, but it is very, very, very important in interpretation of the statutes. So do attend it. And with this, allow me to take your leave. I'm very thankful to all of you and the honorable dignitaries who allowed me to conduct the session, permitted me to conduct the session on this topic. And with the good wishes to all of you, and with the request to take utmost care in this pandemic situation, I take your leave. Yes. Thank you very much.
सर स्टॉप कर दो.